When my brother and his wife framed the woman I love for a crime she did not commit, all to steal my inheritance, I did not show them my evidence. I showed them my grief. I let them believe their cruel lie had broken me. Then, in my workshop, I began to build my own beautiful lie, a magnificent guitar with a secret that would sing the truth of their treachery to the entire world. They thought they were clever, but they forgot one thing. A master craftsman knows that the most beautiful surfaces can hide the most intricate traps. Before we begin, a question for you. Please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments, what is more painful, a betrayal of your trust or a betrayal of your love? My name is Charles Sterling, and at 77 years old, my hands still know the language of wood. Here in Kansas City, Missouri, a city whose very soul is tuned to the sound of jazz and blues, I am a luthier. I build and repair guitars. My small, quiet workshop, filled with the sweet, sharp scent of sawdust and lacquer, is my sanctuary. For 50 years, it was a sanctuary I shared with my wife, Lena. She was a singer with a voice as warm and resonant as the aged spruce I use for my guitar tops. Together, we lived a life of music, her voice and my instruments in a constant, loving conversation. The greatest instrument I ever built was for her. I called it the Lena. It is an archtop guitar, crafted from a single flawless piece of curly maple I had saved for 20 years. Its voice is as soulful and complex as the woman it was named for. After Lena passed, the guitar became the last tangible piece of her song. It is not an instrument, it is the vessel of a memory, and to me, it is priceless. Life, however, has a way of composing new melodies. This past year, a new harmony entered my quiet life. Her name is Isabella, a wonderfully talented singer at a local jazz club, a woman with a kind heart and a laugh that, for the first time in years, made my quiet house feel less empty. Our companionship is a gentle, tentative thing, a quiet song of two people who understand loss and are not afraid of the silence between the notes. My younger brother, David, and his wife Sharon do not approve. David is a musician, or rather, a man who has always wanted the glory of being a musician without the discipline of the craft. He has spent his life in my shadow, his own ambitions always curdling into a quiet, simmering resentment. Sharon is the engine of that resentment. She is a woman who measures a man's worth by the size of his bank account, and she sees my life's work, my collection of priceless, hand-built instruments, as her husband's delayed inheritance. They see Isabella not as a companion for me, but as a threat to their future. Their visits have become tense, their words laced with a subtle poison. "Charles, you have to be careful," Sharon said last week, her voice a low, concerned hum. "A man in your position, with your assets, you're a target for a certain kind of person." She did not say the words gold digger, but the insinuation hung in the air, thick and ugly. David would just nod along, his expression a mask of brotherly concern. "She's right, Charles. We just don't want to see you get hurt." I saw their fear for what it was. It was not a fear for my heart, but for their inheritance. They looked at Isabella and saw a rival claimant to the fortune they had already spent in their minds. The first sign of their more sinister intentions was a small, seemingly insignificant thing. I had mentioned to David that I was having trouble with the old lock on my workshop door. The next day, he showed up with a brand new, high-tech digital lock. "Just want to make sure your collection is secure, brother," he said, installing it himself. He programmed the code for me, but I knew he, too, now had the means to access my most sacred space. He was not securing my legacy, he was securing his access to it. He believed I was a relic from an analog age, too old and too trusting to see the digital key he had just placed in his own pocket. The stage was being set for a drama I did not yet understand. I saw only their fear and their greed. I did not yet see the depths of their cruelty, the lengths they would go to not just secure their inheritance, but to destroy my newfound happiness in the process. They were about to make a move that would turn my quiet life of music into a harsh dissonant chord of betrayal, and the instrument of that betrayal would be the one thing I held most sacred, my Lena's guitar. The quiet harmony of my life with Isabella was shattered on a cold Tuesday in November. It began with a frantic phone call from David. "Charles, you need to get down to your workshop now," he said, his voice a convincing performance of panic. "Something has happened." I rushed over to find a scene of calculated chaos. The new digital lock on my workshop door was blinking an error message. Inside, my tools were scattered and wood shavings were strewn across the floor. And in the center of the room, on my main workbench, was an empty guitar stand. The Lena was gone. My heart seized in my chest, a cold, physical pang of loss so profound it almost buckled my knees. The guitar was not just wood and strings. It was the last song of my wife. As I stood there, reeling from the shock, David and Sharon arrived, their faces masks of worried sympathy. It was Sharon who pointed to a small, unfamiliar object on the floor near the bench. A single elegant silver earring, the kind with a small, distinctive clasp. "Wait a second," she said, her voice full of a dawning theatrical horror. Isn't that one of Isabella's?" I looked at the earring, then at her. I had seen Isabella wear a similar pair, but I couldn't be sure. The seed of doubt, however, had been planted, a tiny, venomous seed in the raw, open wound of my grief. The police came and went, their investigation professional, but ultimately fruitless. There was no sign of a forced entry. The digital lock had been opened with the correct code, a fact that made the investigating officer look at me with a flicker of suspicion. The only evidence was the single silver earring. The conversation that followed, after the police had left, was a masterclass in manipulation. David and Sharon sat with me in my quiet, suddenly cold house, their voices a low, gentle hum of poison. "Charles, I hate to even say this," David began, his voice heavy with false reluctance. "But Isabella has been asking a lot of questions about the collection lately, about its value." Sharon chimed in, her tone soft and sorrowful. "And she has been having some financial troubles, dear. Her car was repossessed last month. We didn't want to worry you." They wove a masterful narrative. A desperate woman, a priceless collection, a secret code she could have learned by watching me. Each detail was a carefully placed brushstroke in their portrait of a gold-digging thief. I listened, my mind a storm of grief and confusion. The loss of the guitar was so overwhelming that it clouded my judgment. I wanted to believe in Isabella, but the evidence, the earring, the story they were telling, it all seemed to fit together with a terrible, damning neatness. My quiet, steady trust in her was being eroded by the relentless, corrosive drip of their insinuations. The true turning point, however, came not from them, but from my own instincts, the instincts of a craftsman who has spent a lifetime understanding the nature of materials. The next morning, still numb with grief, I went to Isabella's small apartment to talk to her. Before I could even speak, I saw her face, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. "Charles," she whispered, "David called me. He told me about the guitar. He asked me if I took it." The raw, genuine pain in her voice was the first clear note of truth in a sea of dissonance. Then, my craftsman's eye noticed something. She was wearing the other silver earring. And as I looked closer, I saw a tiny, almost invisible detail that only a man who works with his hands would notice. The clasp on her earring was a standard factory-made design. The clasp on the earring Sharon had found in my workshop, the one I had examined under my magnifying lamp after the police left, was subtly different. It was a cheaper, slightly cruder imitation. It was a fake. In that single clarifying instant, the entire, ugly truth fell into place. The faked theft, the planted evidence, the carefully constructed narrative. It was all a lie, A cruel, intricate piece of theater designed to do two things: frame the woman who threatened their inheritance and sever my connection to her forever. They had not just stolen my wife's guitar, they had tried to steal my future. My grief for the guitar was still a raw, open wound, but now it was cauterized by a cold, hard, and exquisitely focused rage. They thought they were clever. They thought they could manipulate me with cheap props and sentimental lies. They had no idea that I was a man who could spot a fake from a mile away. I did not tell Isabella what I had discovered. I simply told her that I believed her, that we would find the truth together. But I knew this was a fight I had to wage alone. I had to get the guitar back, and I had to deliver a form of justice that was as intricate, as personal, and as beautifully crafted as the instrument they had stolen. My plan began to form, a melody of revenge taking shape in the quiet of my mind. It would be a plan that used my own unique skills, my knowledge of wood, and my understanding of hidden structures. They had built a lie to frame the woman I loved. I would build a beautiful, resonant truth to expose them. Do you believe that small, overlooked details are often the key to uncovering the biggest lies? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and hit the like button if you think the truth will come out. The discovery of the fake earring was the spark, but my grief for the lost guitar was the fuel. The full scope of their betrayal was a cold, hard knot in my stomach. They had weaponized my most sacred memory, the last tangible piece of my wife Lena, turning it into a prop in their squalid little drama. They had orchestrated a fake crime to frame an innocent woman, all to protect an inheritance they had not earned and did not deserve. The betrayal was not just about money. It was a profound act of emotional vandalism. They had taken a sledgehammer to the foundations of my trust and my newfound happiness. The immediate consequence was that I had to perform the most difficult role of my life, the role of a broken man. I knew they would be watching me, gauging the success of their plan by the depth of my despair. So I gave them the performance they expected. I stopped going to the jazz club to see Isabella sing. I let my phone go unanswered for days at a time. When David and Sharon would visit, their faces masks of cloying sympathy, I would be sitting in the dark, my workshop gathering dust, a portrait of a man utterly defeated by grief and betrayal. "We're so sorry, Charles," Sharon would say, placing a consoling hand on my shoulder. "We know how much that guitar meant to you. And to think Isabella could have done such a thing. It's just monstrous." I would just nod, my silence their confirmation. I let them believe they had won, that they had successfully severed my connection to Isabella and cleared the path to their inheritance. I let them grow comfortable and complacent in their victory. While they were celebrating their cleverness, I was in my workshop late at night, a single lamp burning, my grief now channeled into a cold, meticulous focus. My plan for revenge would not be a confrontation. It would be a creation. It would be a guitar, a new masterpiece, a Trojan horse built of maple and rosewood. I began by reaching out to a select group of trusted colleagues in the luthier community, men I had known for decades. I told them a version of the truth, that my Lena guitar had been stolen, and that I suspected it was now in the hands of a private, unscrupulous collector. I asked them to put out feelers on the black market, to listen for whispers of a one-of-a-kind sterling archtop being offered for a quiet sale. I knew David did not have the courage or the connections to sell it himself. He would need a middleman, and the world of high-end instrument dealing is a very small, very talkative one. My next step was to begin building the instrument of their downfall. I chose the materials with a theatrical and symbolic purpose. I used a spectacular piece of quilted maple for the back and sides, and wood known for its beautiful three-dimensional patterns that seemed to shift and change depending on the light. For the top, I used a piece of aged spruce, a wood prized for its tonal clarity. It would be a guitar of breathtaking, undeniable beauty, a lure so powerful that David, the failed musician who always craved the best, would not be able to resist it. The true secret of this new guitar, however, was not in its wood or its sound. It was in its construction. I designed it with a hidden compartment, using a series of precisely placed rare earth magnets and a seamless, almost invisible seam along the curve of the body. I engineered a small, removable panel on the back of the guitar. When closed, it was completely undetectable, held in place by the powerful magnets, its wood grain perfectly aligned with the rest of the instrument. But with a specific tool, a small, powerful magnet of the opposite polarity, the panel could be released, revealing a shallow, velvet-lined cavity inside the guitar's body. This was my secret vessel, the place where I would deliver the truth. While the slow, patient work of building the guitar continued, the whispers I had hoped for began to surface. A colleague from Chicago called me. He had heard a rumor from a dealer, a story about a nervous man trying to sell a priceless sterling archtop, a guitar that matched the description of the Lena. The seller was insisting on an anonymous, cash-only transaction. The dealer had been suspicious and had refused, but he had a description of the man. It was a perfect match for my brother David. I now knew the guitar was not destroyed. It was in his possession, a hot potato he was desperately trying to unload. I had him. He was a fish on the line, and I was about to create the perfect, irresistible lure to reel him in. My plan was simple. I would finish my new masterpiece. I would then let it be known that this new guitar, this final spectacular creation, was to be my swan song, the last instrument I would ever build. I would call it the Phoenix, a name that would appeal to David's sense of drama. And then I would announce that I was giving it away as the grand prize in a prestigious, nationally advertised acoustic guitar competition, a competition I would host right here in Kansas City. I knew David's ego, his bottomless well of resentment and thwarted ambition. The chance to not only get his hands on my final masterpiece, but to win it, to prove his own musical superiority on a public stage, would be a temptation he could not possibly resist. He would enter the competition. He would have to. And when he stood on that stage, holding my beautiful Trojan Horse guitar, he would be holding the instrument of his own public humiliation. He thought he had silenced my wife's song. He had no idea I was about to compose a new one, a ballad of his own greed and stupidity, and the whole world would be listening. Have you ever had to use your greatest passion or skill to fight back against a betrayal? Let me know in the comments. With the Trojan Horse guitar taking shape on my workbench, its quilted maple back shimmering like a trapped wave, my strategy moved into its public phase. I had to create a stage, a grand and irresistible arena for my brother's ego to perform its final self-destructive act. I began by calling a few old friends, influential figures in the national music scene, a festival organizer in Nashville, the editor of an acoustic guitar magazine, a respected local musician. I pitched them my idea, a new, high-stakes acoustic guitar competition to be held in Kansas City, the Heartland Guitar Showcase. I would put up the grand prize myself, a one-of-a-kind final masterpiece from my own workshop, the Phoenix. Their response was immediate and overwhelming. They loved the story, the reclusive master luthier coming out of his grief to create one final legendary instrument. They saw the romance, the drama, the undeniable human interest angle. Within a week, we had a venue, a panel of esteemed judges, and a major magazine as a media sponsor. The Heartland Guitar Showcase was no longer just an idea. It was a highly anticipated national event. My decision to make the competition the centerpiece of my revenge was a calculated one. I knew David's psychology intimately. A simple, private confrontation would allow him to lie, to deny, to squirm his way out. But a public competition was a different matter. It was a trial by fire for a musician. It offered the one thing his greedy, insecure heart craved more than money: public validation. The chance to be judged as a superior musician, to win my ultimate prize in front of the world, would be an irresistible lure. While the competition was being organized, I continued my performance as a broken man for David and Sharon. I sold my car, telling them the memories of driving with Lena were too painful. The truth was, I no longer needed it, and the cash from the sale would help fund the competition. They saw this as further proof of my decline, another step in my slow, sad retreat from the world. Their visits became less about feigned sympathy and more about gentle, probing questions regarding my will and my estate. "Charles, have you thought about simplifying things?" Sharon asked one afternoon, her voice a soft purr. "Perhaps a trust? It would make things so much easier to manage." They were already circling, vultures growing impatient for the feast. They believed my grief had made me pliable, suggestible. They had no idea my mind was a whirlwind of logistics, planning, and cold, hard, creative fury. The announcement of the Heartland Guitar Showcase went live on the magazine's website, complete with a dramatic, beautifully photographed article about me and the story of the Phoenix. The article described the guitar in loving, almost mythic detail. It spoke of its quilted maple back, its aged spruce top, its intricate abalone inlays. It was a piece of master-quality marketing, designed to make any serious guitarist's heart ache with desire. And as a final, perfect touch, I had the magazine include the entry rules. One of the rules stated that all contestants had to perform on a guitar they themselves owned. They could not borrow or rent an instrument for the competition. This was a small, crucial detail, a hidden barb on the hook. David could not enter the competition playing one of his own mediocre guitars. If he wanted to win, if he wanted to truly compete, he would have to use the best instrument he had. He would have to use the Lena. The day the article was published, I received a call from David. His voice was a strange, unreadable mixture of excitement and suspicion. "Charles, I saw the article," he said. "A competition? A new guitar? I thought you were done building." "I needed a project," I said, my voice deliberately weary. "Something to keep my hands busy." "It will be the last one." "It looks beautiful," he said, the desire in his voice a palpable thing. "You're really just giving it away?" "It's not for me to keep," I replied. "It needs to be played. May the best musician win." I knew, with every fiber of my being, that he would enter. I had built him a stage, I had crafted him a prize, and I had created a set of rules that would force him to bring the evidence of his first crime with him to the scene of his second. The final piece of my plan was the most delicate. I needed to prepare the contents of the secret compartment. I gathered the evidence, the fake silver earring, a copy of the police report from the theft, and a small, high-resolution photograph of the earring Isabella was actually wearing that day. But that was not enough. I needed to deliver the narrative. I sat down and on a beautiful piece of aged parchment, I wrote a letter. It was not a letter of anger or accusation. It was a letter of profound sadness and disappointment. A letter from an older brother to the younger one he had loved and lost. It detailed the entire sordid story, from the fake earring to my discovery of the truth. It was a confession, written in my hand, but it would be his story to tell. I placed the evidence and the letter inside a small velvet pouch. It fit perfectly into the hidden, magnetic compartment of the Phoenix. The Trojan Horse was now armed and ready. The stage was set. The prize was waiting. And the star of the show was about to walk into the spotlight, carrying the instrument of his own undoing. Do you think a public stage is the best place for a private truth to be revealed? Let me know in the comments, and hit the like button if you're ready for the final performance. The 2 months leading up to the Heartland Guitar Showcase were a masterclass in deception. On the surface, I was a grieving recluse, a master craftsman preparing for his final bow. I gave a single, poignant interview to the sponsoring guitar magazine, speaking of the Phoenix as my last testament to the art of luthiery, a final tribute to my late wife's inspiration. The story was perfect, tragic, and deeply compelling. It cemented the competition as the must-see musical event of the year. My phone rang with entry requests from some of the finest acoustic musicians in the country. The stage was set for a truly epic showdown of talent. As I had predicted, 2 weeks after the announcement, David's official entry form arrived. His application was a monument to his own ego. He listed his musical accomplishments, exaggerating minor local gigs into major performances. He wrote a flowery, self-important artist's statement about his unique connection to the blues. But the most important line was at the bottom, under the heading, "Instrument to be used in competition." He had written, "Sterling archtop, the Lena, the Fool." He had just signed a confession, a formal declaration that he was in possession of the stolen instrument, and he had mailed it directly to me. I photocopied the entry form and placed it in the velvet pouch alongside the other evidence, another nail in the coffin he was building for himself. While the world saw me preparing for a competition, my real work was a quiet, relentless campaign of psychological warfare. I knew David would be practicing obsessively, his ego driving him to perfect his performance. I decided to give him an audience. I hired Mr. Davis, the same discreet private investigator who had helped me in the past, for a new task. I had him park a surveillance van down the street from David and Sharon's house. It was equipped with a long-range parabolic microphone. For the next month, I received daily audio recordings of David's practice sessions. I listened for hours, not to the music, but to the conversations in between. I heard Sharon coaching him, her voice a sharp, ambitious hiss. "More feeling, David. You need to sell the story. You're the brother, the one who truly understands his legacy." I heard them arguing about song choices. I heard them gloating about their inevitable victory and the life that would follow. "Once we have the Phoenix," Sharon said one evening, her voice clear as a bell on the recording, "we can sell them both. The Lena and the Phoenix. A matched set. It will be a fortune. We'll be in Tuscany by Christmas." Each conversation was another layer of evidence, another track on the final damning recording I was compiling. I was not just building a case. I was capturing the raw, unvarnished sound of their greed. The final step was to ensure the climax would be as public and as humiliating as possible. I used my own money, the money from the sale of my car, to hire a professional, multi-camera video production crew. I told the festival organizers it was my gift to the competition, a way to document this historic event for posterity. The crew would not just be recording the stage. They would have cameras in the audience, cameras backstage, capturing every angle, every reaction. I wanted a perfect, high-definition record of the moment my brother's world came crashing down. The day before the competition, I put the final touches on the Phoenix. I polished its gleaming finish until it shone like a dark jewel. I strung it with a fresh set of bronze strings. Then, I performed the final, most critical step. I took the small velvet pouch containing the evidence and the letter, and I placed it inside the hidden, magnetic compartment in the back of the guitar. With a soft, satisfying click, the panel sealed itself, its seams vanishing into the swirling grain of the quilted maple. The Trojan Horse was now fully armed. It was a masterpiece of beauty, of sound, and of pure, unadulterated vengeance. That evening, David and Sharon came to my house. It was a final, pre-battle visit. They brought a bottle of expensive wine, their faces glowing with a confident, predatory excitement. "Tomorrow is the big day, brother," David said, clapping me on the shoulder. "Are you ready to see your legacy passed on?" "I am ready to see justice done," I replied, my voice quiet and even. They mistook my words for a simple, sentimental statement. They smiled, raised their glasses, and toasted to a future they believed was already theirs. They had no idea they were drinking a toast to their own execution. They saw a beautiful, priceless guitar. They did not see the time bomb ticking silently inside it. The performance was about to begin, and I had already written the final devastating chord. Do you believe that a person's own ego is the easiest tool to use against them? Share your opinion in the comments, and don't forget to hit the like button if you're ready for the showcase. The night of the Heartland Guitar Showcase was electric. The historic Folly Theater in downtown Kansas City was sold out, its velvet seats filled with a reverent, knowledgeable audience of musicians, collectors, and critics. The air was thick with anticipation, not just for the music, but for the story, the legend of the master luthier and his final mythic creation. The video crew I had hired was everywhere, their cameras sweeping across the audience, capturing the sense of occasion. Backstage was a tense, quiet world of tuning pegs and nervous energy. The other finalists, all brilliant musicians, warmed up in respectful silence. And then there was David. He was a peacock in a room full of eagles. He paced back and forth, a bubble of arrogant energy, with Sharon hovering at his side, whispering last-minute words of encouragement. He was holding the Lena, my late wife's guitar, cradling it not with the love of a musician, but with the pride of a conqueror. He believed this was his coronation. He had no idea he was a lamb being led to a beautifully orchestrated slaughter. The competition was fierce. The level of talent on display was breathtaking. One by one, the finalists took the stage and poured their hearts out through their instruments. Finally, it was David's turn. He walked into the spotlight to a wave of applause, an applause born from the story the magazine had written, the story of the master's brother. He looked out at the crowd, a smug, confident smile on his face. He held up the Lena, letting the stage lights glint off its aged, beautiful finish. He was not just a musician, he was a spectacle. He began to play, and I had to admit, he played well. His years of resentment had been channeled into a fierce, technically proficient performance. But there was no soul in it. It was the music of a man who had mastered the notes, but had completely missed the song. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. He took a deep, theatrical bow, soaking in the adoration he had craved his entire life. The judges conferred. After a few tense moments, the head judge, a legendary local bluesman, walked to the microphone. "This has been one of the most difficult decisions we've ever had to make," he said, his voice a low, gravelly drawl. "But the winner of the first ever Heartland Guitar Showcase and the new owner of the Phoenix is David Sterling." The theater erupted. David's face exploded with a look of pure, unadulterated triumph. He raised his fists in the air, a conquering hero. Sharon, in the front row, was openly weeping with joy. This was their moment. They had won it all. I walked onto the stage from the wings, carrying the Phoenix. It gleamed under the stage lights, a dark, magnificent jewel. I walked to my brother, who was basking in the roar of the crowd. "Congratulations, brother," I said, my voice quiet but amplified by the microphones. "You played well. She's yours." I handed the guitar to him. He took it, his hands trembling with excitement. He held it up for the cheering crowd, a king holding his new crown. Then I turned to the audience. "Before my brother plays us a final victory tune on his new prize," I began, my voice clear and commanding, cutting through the applause, "I think it's important for everyone to understand the true story of this evening." A confused silence began to fall over the crowd. David looked at me, his triumphant smile faltering, replaced by a flicker of confusion and alarm. I gestured to the guitar he was holding. "This new guitar, the Phoenix, is a very special instrument. It's not just a beautiful piece of craftsmanship. It's also a box with a story inside." I then looked directly at the head judge. "Sir, if I may, I have a small tool in my pocket. I would like you to be the one to open it." I handed him a small, powerful magnet. Puzzled but intrigued, the judge took the magnet and followed my instructions. He held it to the back of the guitar, at the exact spot I had indicated. There was a soft, audible click, and a perfectly seamless panel of wood detached from the back of the guitar and fell into his waiting hand, revealing the velvet-lined compartment inside. A collective gasp went through the audience. The video camera zoomed in, projecting the impossible image onto the large screens on either side of the stage. The judge reached into the compartment and pulled out the velvet pouch. He opened it and tipped the contents into his hand. A single fake silver earring, a photocopy of a police report, a high-resolution photograph, and a folded piece of parchment. He unfolded the parchment, my letter, and began to read it silently. The entire theater was holding its breath. David stood frozen, the beautiful phoenix in his hands, his face a mask of pure, dawning horror. He was beginning to understand. This was not a prize. It was a trap. The judge finished reading the letter, his face grim. He looked up, not at me, but at my brother. He then walked to the microphone, the letter still in his hand. "Folks," he said, his voice a low, angry growl, "it seems we have a problem here. A very serious problem." He held up the entry form David had signed. "This form, and the evidence provided in this letter, states that the guitar Mr. David Sterling used to win this competition. The guitar known as the Lena was reported stolen from his brother Charles on November the 12th. The silence in the theater was absolute. Every single eye, every camera, was now locked on my brother. His face had gone from triumphant to ashen. The beautiful, priceless guitar in his hands now felt like a lead weight. His victory, his public validation, his entire world, had just been turned to smoke and ash in a single, perfectly executed, and very public moment of truth. He was no longer a winner. He was just a thief, standing in a spotlight of his own making. The judge's words hung in the air, an indictment delivered with the cold, hard finality of a prison sentence. David stood paralyzed in the spotlight, the beautiful Phoenix guitar in one hand, the Lena slung over his shoulder. He was a man literally weighed down by his own greed and deception. The audience, which had been cheering for him just moments before, was now a silent, aping sea of judgment. Sharon, in the front row, looked as if she had been turned to stone, her tear-streaked face of joy now a frozen mask of horror. The judge was not finished. He looked directly at David, his eyes narrowed with the contempt of a true musician for a fraud. "This competition is about more than just fast fingers, son," he said, his voice a low growl that carried to every corner of the theater. "It's about soul. It's about honesty. And it seems you're fresh out of both." He then turned to the audience. "By the authority of the judging panel, I am officially rescinding the title. David Sterling is disqualified." The words were a guillotine. The video camera zoomed in on David's face as his last shred of composure shattered. He let out a strangled, inarticulate cry, a sound of pure, animalistic despair. He looked from the judge's stone-cold face to my own quiet, impassive one, and he finally understood. He had not been invited here to win. He had been invited here to be judged. He did the only thing a courtier could do. He fled. He dropped the Phoenix onto the stage with a resonant, mournful clang, turned, and practically ran from the spotlight, his brother's stolen guitar still strapped to his back. He disappeared into the wings, the sound of his frantic, stumbling footsteps the only music he left behind. The theater remained silent for a long moment, the audience collectively processing the sheer, brutal totality of the downfall they had just witnessed. Then the judge walked over, picked up the Phoenix, and brought it to me. He held it out, not as a prize, but as a piece of evidence being returned. "I believe this belongs to you, Charles," he said, his voice now gentle. The audience, as if on a single cue, rose to their feet. The applause that followed was not the polite applause for a winner. It was a deafening, heartfelt roar of support for the truth, for the quiet, dignified master who had refused to let his legacy be stolen. The aftermath was swift and absolute. The story of the Heartland Guitar Showcase became a national sensation, a viral tale of poetic justice. The video footage I had commissioned was played on news channels and shared millions of times online. David and Sharon became infamous, their faces a meme for greed and public humiliation. They sold their house and left Kansas City in the dead of night, disappearing into a self-imposed exile of shame. I never saw or heard from them again. A week after the competition, a large, unmarked crate arrived at my workshop. Inside was the Lena. There was no note, no apology, just the silent, begrudging return of stolen property. I took her out of the case, her familiar weight a comfort in my hands. I ran my fingers over the strings, and the first, clear note I played felt like a welcome home. My life returned to its quiet, musical rhythm. I did not keep the phoenix. Its purpose, a beautiful resonant instrument of justice, had been served. I donated it to the local music museum, where it was placed in a special exhibit, right next to a small plaque that told the whole incredible story. Isabella and I began to build our own quiet harmony, our companionship now free from the shadows of suspicion and greed. We would sit in my workshop, the scent of wood and lacquer in the air, and she would sing, her voice filling the space, a new, beautiful song to replace the one that had been stolen and returned. My revenge was not in my brother's ruin, but in the restoration of truth. It was in the clear, ringing sound of a perfect A minor chord, played on a guitar that had come home. It was in the quiet peace of my workshop, in the love of a good woman, and in the profound craftsman's satisfaction of knowing that I had taken a story of ugly dissonant betrayal and had with my own two hands turned it back into a thing of perfect resonant beauty. That is how I got my so sweet revenge, and I would do it all over again. Thank you for following my story. Please subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment telling me what you believe is the most beautiful instrument in the world and why.